All right, today we're jumping into a story that basically turned the entire pharmaceutical industry upside down. It's all about a drug named Elavil and a marketing plan that started in a really weird place. Not with a disease, but with a solution that was desperately looking for a problem. So let's just start with a quick thought experiment. What if you came up with this amazing, brilliant solution, but you didn't actually have a problem for it to solve? I mean, what's your next move? Well, that's the exact puzzle one company was staring at way back in the 1960s. And their answer? Well, it was to do everything completely backward. They came up with this strategy that, honestly, we can just call a drug in reverse. And it totally flipped the script on how medicine was sold. Okay, so normally, drug development is pretty straightforward, right? You start with a disease, some kind of health problem, and then you work to create a drug to fight it. Problem first, solution second. But this reverse model, it does the complete opposite. You've already got a drug, you know it does something, and now your whole challenge is to find, or maybe even grow, the disease that it's supposed to treat.
And that right there brings us to the very heart of our story today, what I'm calling the depression dilemma. And of course, the pharmaceutical giant that decided to solve it in a pretty radical way.
Okay, so let's set the stage a little bit. The company we're talking about is Merck. The drug is called Elavil, and it was designed to treat clinical depression, all the way back in the 1960s. Sounds pretty straightforward, doesn't it? Well, yeah, there was a massive catch. So here's the thing. Back then, in the 60s, clinical depression was seen as a really rare condition. I mean, not at all the widespread issue that we understand it to be today. So for Merck, this meant they had an incredibly tiny group of potential patients. They had a drug, a solution, but almost no one to sell it to. This was a huge business problem, and it forced Merck to get really creative. Look, they couldn't change the drug itself, right? So they had to change something else. And that's what led them to a brand new and honestly, a paradigm-shifting strategy. And here it is, their big, radical idea. The solution, they realized, wasn't about finding more patients. Nope, it was about increasing the number of diagnoses. Think about that. If you can't find enough sick people for your cure, then maybe you need to expand the very definition of what it means to be sick in the first place. And this is the absolute key to the whole story. Merck just completely shifted its focus. They stopped selling Elavil, the drug, and they started selling clinical depression, the disease. This was basically the birth of what we now call a disease awareness campaign. So how in the world did they actually pull this off? Well, their method was, you're going to love this, it was incredibly simple and almost kind of shockingly direct. It was a pretty straightforward two-step plan. Okay, step one, Merck went out and bought thousands of copies of a book called Recognizing the Depressed Patient. And step two, they just mailed those books, totally free of charge, to general practitioners, family doctors all across the country. And when I say they mailed them out, I mean the scale was just massive. We're talking 50,000 copies. 50,000. They weren't just aiming for a few specialists here. No, they just blanketed the entire country, putting this educational material right into the hands of the doctors who see people every single day for all kinds of common problems. So the big question, right? Did this totally audacious plan actually work? Oh yeah. The results were absolutely staggering. It created what you could call the billion-dollar effect. The impact was, it was immediate and it was undeniable. Prescriptions for Elavil just skyrocketed. And what's really wild is that there was already another antidepressant out there on the market, but Merck's campaign, it did more than just sell their own drug. It basically energized the entire category by raising the profile of depression itself. And the long-term effect, just look at these numbers. Back in the 1960s, the whole market for antidepressants was worth maybe a few $1,000,000. Fast forward 30 years, and it had just exploded into a multi-billion-dollar industry. This campaign didn't just make a ripple, you guys. It created a tidal wave.
And, there's a quote from the material we looked at that just sums this all up perfectly. The ultimate lesson, the legacy of the whole Elavil story, was this powerful new marketing idea. If you want to sell the treatment, you first have to sell the disease.
Look, this story is, 60 years old now, but the strategy, it's probably more relevant today than it has ever been. And it really leaves us with one final big question to think about. What other awareness campaigns are out there right now, shaping how we see the world, and maybe even how we see ourselves?